They laughed at the Muslims. They mocked the prayers. They insulted the hijab, tore down the mosques, and burned the Qur'an. The world watched in silence. The skies remained quiet. But the earth remembered. The oppressed cried out not with anger, not with revenge, but with a whisper that rose like thunder. Ya Allah! They placed their faith in the one who never sleeps, who never forgets, whose justice is never delayed. And then something happened that no one saw coming. One morning, the maps changed. Not gradually, not politically, overnight. Indiag was gone. A vast land with millions erased, not by missiles, not by war, but by the will of the Almighty. Borders redrawn by the unseen. A nation that once flexed its power and trampled the rights of the innocent found itself in pieces. Shattered, disconnected, and consumed from within. It didn't start with fire. It started with silence. Birds stopped chirping in the skies over Delhi. Rivers reversed their flow. Technology failed. Satellites blinked out. And then came the darkness. Power grids shut down, communication lines collapsed. And the cities that once roared with arrogance now lay in deafening stillness. Do not people stepped outside and found nothing but clouds of dust. But it wasn't nuclear. It wasn't man-made. It was something else. The earth was trembling, but not cracking. It was warning. And when the people looked to the sky for answers, they saw a message. Not with their eyes, but in their hearts. A divine whisper, a realization too heavy to carry. This was not nature. This was not science. This was Allah. He had given warnings. Through famine, through floods, through fire. But the world chose pride over repentance. And now the scrolls had turned. In every corner of the globe, Muslims fell to their knees in awe. Not celebration, not vengeance, just awe. Tears flowed, not for destruction, but for proof, because for centuries they had been told their faith was backward, their book irrelevant, their prophet misunderstood. But now the world had seen it. A nation that had poured billions into weapons, that had silenced the oppressed, that had turned Islamophobia into entertainment, had vanished from maps made by their own hands. Geopolitical experts tried to explain it. They called it a cyber attack, a glitch, a mass delusion. But how could a glitch erase every international record? How could it rewrite maps on walls, in books, and in memories? No one could find the data. No one could trace the code, because there was no code. This wasn't a revolution. This was a reckoning. Allah does not forget. He delays for wisdom, not weakness. When innocent blood was spilled in Kashmir, when women cried in the dark corners of detention centers, when children screamed as bulldozers crushed their homes, the world stayed silent. But the heavens did not. When Allah says, "Kun," it is, and so it was. The story spread like wildfire, not through news anchors, but through people. From heart to heart, because even those who didn't believe knew. Deep down, they knew this was not a random incident. This was not a collapse. This was divine intervention. The erasure of a flag, the vanishing of borders, the breakdown of identity, the illusion of man made power crushed by a single unseen command. And Muslims everywhere stood taller, not with arrogance, but with humility. They understood now more than ever. Their strength was never in numbers, never in wealth, never in armies. It was always in their submission, always in their sujood, always in their tears that fell for the sake of Allah. For years they were told to integrate, to modernize, to leave their deen at the door of democracy. But today, their deen had rewritten the world order. A young man in Gaza, who had no shoes and lived under rubble, recited Surah al-Fil with trembling lips. and felt it come alive, didn't Allah destroy the army of the elephant with birds? Today, a nation more powerful than elephants, more vicious than any army, was scattered without a shot being fired, and he smiled, not because of death, but because of justice. A mother in Hyderabad once held her son as police dragged him into a van for saying, "Allahu Akbar," too loud. She thought she'd never see justice in this world. But as the world watched India disappear from maps, she raised her hands and said, "My Allah never forgets." She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. And Allah delivered it in His way. This wasn't just about India. This was a message to the entire world. A wake-up call. A divine note written across the skies: do not play with the honor of my people. Do not mock my name. Do not think I am unaware. Allah does not forget. And when He moves, the world changes. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. The Ummah had been scattered, broken, colonized, and humiliated for generations. But from this moment, something shifted. People who once hid their Islam in fear now wore it with pride. Youth who once doubted now preached with fire. Nations that once bowed to superpowers now turned to Mecca. Because they had seen what happens when Allah stands for His people. And while some cried over the loss of a nation, the world began to ask, what kind of power could do this? What kind of truth were the Muslims holding on to? What kind of book could predict such justice? They began to read the Qur'an, not to criticize it, but to understand it. And every verse hit harder than any bomb, every word deeper than any constitution. They found a strength they had never known, a truth they had always ignored. And the Muslims, they didn't gloat. They wept, because this was never about hatred. It was about hope. Hope that one day the world would see. Hope that one day the oppressed would rise. Hope that one day the name of Allah would be exalted, not mocked. And now the world was listening. This was not the end of a country. It was the rise of a truth that can never be erased, because when Allah wills, the world obeys.